It was my engagement party, a night that was supposed to be the start of forever. But then, in front of hundreds of guests, the man I was going to marry looked me dead in the eye and said, "My ex-girlfriend will always be a part of my life. Either you accept that, or we call off this wedding." Everyone waited for me to break, for the tears, the drama. But all I said was one word, a single word that shattered his arrogance and changed my entire world. That evening, the Charleston sky was a masterpiece of orange and purple, painted behind the majestic silhouettes of church steeples and historic rooftops. Our celebration was held at a luxurious estate, a place where modern grandeur met classic Southern charm. Soft melodies from a string quartet drifted through the air, mingling with the delicate scent of jasmine that adorned every corner. This was it, the engagement party of Amelia Hayes and Jackson Pierce, a picture-perfect moment for what the world saw as a dream couple. Amelia, floated through the crowd in a lavender dress I designed myself, a reflection of my own architectural mind, structured, thoughtful, and possessing an understated beauty. My smile was genuine, my intelligent eyes radiating warmth. Beside me, Jackson Pierce, dazzling in a bespoke suit, was the absolute center of attention. His hearty laugh, his confident gaze, everything about him screamed success. He was the brilliant entrepreneur, heir to a respected family, my prince of business. My mom, her eyes brimming with happy tears, hugged me tight. "I've never seen you so happy, honey." I believed it. Jackson, ever charming, put his arm around her. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll take great care of Amelia." My father, a university professor, simply clapped Jackson on the shoulder, a proud smile on his face. Jackson was the intelligent young man who would secure his only daughter's future. Even Jackson's family, usually so reserved, watched me with approval. An intelligent, independent daughter-in-law from a cultured Charleston family, perfect for their image. But amidst all this perfection, I noticed little things. Small, unsettling undercurrents. Like when an old friend of Jackson's slapped him on the back and said, "Finally, someone to tame this wild lion." Jackson's laugh sounded a bit hollow then, and his eyes darted away, as if searching for something that wasn't there. Sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, he'd go silent, his smile fading as he unconsciously typed on his phone. When I'd ask, the answer was always the same. "It's nothing, honey, just stress from work." I chose to believe him. For me, love was built on trust, and I believed our foundation was solid. That night, we were laying the first stone. I had no idea Jackson himself was about to take a sledgehammer to it. After a decadent dinner, accompanied by a smooth jazz trio, the master of ceremonies announced the family speeches. My father gave a brief, heartfelt talk. Jackson's father followed with a more effusive speech, overflowing with pride. Then it was our turn. Let's give a big round of applause for Jackson Pierce and Amelia Hayes. The MC boomed. Jackson took the microphone first, smiling broadly at the applauding guests. "Good evening," he said, his voice deep and confident. "Being here next to Amelia is a dream come true. She is extraordinary, intelligent, talented, and most importantly, she understands me." Guests smiled, a few dabbing at tears. I looked at him, my heart full of love. This man was going to be my husband. Then Jackson paused. The smile on his face morphed, just slightly, into something more serious. The festive atmosphere began to shift. "In building a relationship, I believe in absolute honesty," he continued, his eyes now fixed on me, as if we were the only two people in the room. "Honesty, from the very beginning, is the most important pillar. That's why tonight, in front of all of you, I want to make one thing clear." A hush fell over the room. Even the jazz trio seemed to soften. Guests leaned forward, curious. Jackson took a deep breath. Then, in a clear, firm voice, he uttered the sentences that would freeze time. "Clara Reed, my ex-girlfriend, will always be a part of my life." A murmur rippled through the guests. Clara Reed was a name known among his circle. They'd been in a long relationship, breaking up just before he met me. Jackson raised a hand for silence. "I will never abandon her, whether as a friend or a business partner. Our relationship has changed, but our bond will exist forever. This is a part of me, a part of my past and my present. Then he turned his gaze fully to me, his face defiant, as if putting me on trial before a public court. "Amelia, if you don't like it," he said, his voice booming through the speakers, stabbing the heart of everyone listening. "If you can't accept that, then we'll call off this wedding." The world stopped. The music ceased completely. The distant clatter of a dropped spoon sounded like a cannon shot. Hundreds of eyes, once filled with admiration, turned in unison towards me. Their gazes were a mixture of shock, pity, confusion, and a cruel curiosity. My parents' faces paled. My father clenched his fists under the table. My mother stared, mouth agape, horrified. Everyone watched, waiting for my reaction. The tears, the drama, the desperate plea. For me, that moment was like being inside a soundproof bubble. A ringing in my ears drowned out all the whispers. I didn't see the hundreds of judging eyes. I only saw him, Jackson, standing beside me, having just emotionally stripped me bare. But what I felt was not shame, not the sharp pang of betrayal. Strangely, what came was a cold surge of astonishing clarity. In seconds, all the puzzle pieces about Jackson clicked into place. His distant attitude, his secretive phone, the late-night business calls with an unnamed colleague. It all pointed to one name, Clara Reed. Jackson wasn't being honest. He was declaring his power. He wasn't asking for understanding. He was issuing an ultimatum. This wasn't a relationship built on honesty, but on terms and conditions he had just read aloud. And I, Amelia, was unwilling to sign that contract. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a strengthening adrenaline. I looked into Jackson's eyes, still watching me defiantly. I saw arrogance there, the absolute certainty that I would bow my head, perhaps cry, and reluctantly nod to save face. Jackson didn't know me at all. An almost imperceptible smile formed on my lips. Without breaking eye contact, I reached out to the paralyzed master of ceremonies and asked for the second microphone. He, a seasoned professional, was so stunned he handed it to me on pure instinct. I brought it to my lips. The silence was deafening. I could feel my mother's heart pounding from across the room, feel the tension of everyone waiting for me to break. I took a slow breath. My voice, when it came, had no tremor, no sob. It was perfectly clear and steady. Okay, it was just that one word. Then, with a calm gesture, I placed the microphone back on the table. I turned slightly and gave my parents a small, reassuring nod, a nonverbal signal that said, "It's all right. I'm okay." Then, with the elegance of a queen, I turned to the still frozen MC and said, in my normal voice, "We can continue. I believe dessert can be served now." The effect of my action was far more devastating than if I had screamed or cried. Utter confusion swept the room. Guests looked at each other, not understanding. Jackson was the most surprised. His arrogant face now showed utter astonishment. This was not the reaction he had planned. He had expected a fight or a surrender. He was completely unprepared for this calm acceptance that somehow felt like a total rejection. I sat back down in my seat, picked up a glass of water, and drank slowly, as if Jackson's speech hadn't been a bomb that had just destroyed my future, but a slightly odd little interlude. Among the ruins of my life's plans, I, Amelia Hayes, for the first time, felt whole. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. I managed to survive the remaining hour of the party on autopilot. I smiled. I nodded. I thanked the guests who said their goodbyes with awkward faces. Many tried to give me looks of pity, but I returned a gaze so serene that they were the ones who felt ashamed. Jackson tried to pull me aside to talk several times. "Amelia, we need to talk. What did you mean by okay?" He whispered nervously. "Later, Jackson." I replied each time, my voice polite but icy. I had erected an invisible wall around myself, and for the first time, Jackson couldn't break through. When the music finally stopped and the lights began to dim, my family prepared to go home. I hugged Jackson's parents, who looked equally confused. "Thank you for coming," I said, as if nothing had happened. The drive back was like a journey through another dimension. No one spoke. My father gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, his knuckles white. My mother stared out the window, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. I sat in the back, watching the lights of my historic city, which usually seemed warm and familiar, now looking blurry and distant. I wasn't sad. The emotion dominating my mind was relief, as if a heavy burden, whose existence I hadn't even been aware of, had suddenly been lifted from my shoulders. I replayed Jackson's words, no longer with emotion, but with the logic of an architect examining cracks in a building. Jackson's declaration wasn't a small fissure. It was fundamental damage to the foundation. A building can be repainted, the interior changed. But if the foundation is weak, it's only a matter of time before everything collapses. Any effort to repair it only delays the inevitable disaster. It's better to demolish it now and build something new from scratch on solid ground. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was filled with my parents' love and concern, their wounded dignity, and the big question of what would come next. I knew they were holding back from me, giving me space. When the car stopped, my father turned off the engine, but for a moment, no one moved. "Amelia," he said, his voice low, slightly hoarse. In his usually kind eyes, there was a storm of contained emotions. "Whatever you decide, your mother and I will always be behind you. Always." My mother turned around, tears finally rolling down her cheeks. "Don't worry about what people will say. Just think about your happiness, honey." That unconditional support was the only thing that nearly broke my composure. A warmth spread through my chest. I didn't cry, but I reached out and took my mother's hand. "Thanks, Mom." "Dad," I whispered. I knew what I had to do. I went into my room. The space was a reflection of myself. Pearl gray walls, minimalist wooden furniture, a large drafting table facing the window. Everything orderly, efficient, serene. I didn't slam the door or throw things. I simply sat on the edge of the bed, letting the quiet of the night envelop me. My phone on the nightstand vibrated incessantly. Notifications of messages and calls. Dozens from worried friends. Dozens of missed calls from Jackson. I glanced at his messages. "Amelia, pick up the phone. We need to talk." "Amelia, did you do that on purpose to humiliate me?" "Amelia, I was just trying to be honest. Why are you acting so childish?" "Amelia, answer me." I read them without emotion. Jackson's words were just the final confirmation I needed. In the midst of this crisis, what concerned Jackson was not my hurt feelings or our collapsing relationship. What mattered to him was his own bruised ego and damaged image. He was twisting the facts, making himself the victim of honesty and labeling my reaction as immature. I put my phone back on silent. There was nothing more to talk about. Everything had already been said very clearly. In front of hundreds of people, I went to my drafting table and turned on the lamp. On the wall were sketches of a wedding dress, blueprints for our future house, a color palette for the wedding decor. For months, they had been a source of joy. Tonight, they looked like relics from someone else's life. With a decisive movement, I took down the papers one by one. I didn't rip them. I just stacked them neatly and put them in the bottom drawer. Out of sight, out of mind. Then I sat in front of my laptop and opened it. The screen's light illuminated my calm, resolute face. I opened a folder named Wedding Prep AP. Inside were dozens of subfolders: catering, venue, invitations, decor, photographer. I created a new document. The title was Wedding Cancellation Plan. My fingers began to dance across the keyboard. I drafted emails for each vendor. The sentences were polite, professional, leaving no room for negotiation. The wedding to Jackson Pierce was canceled for personal reasons. I was prepared to cover all cancellation penalties. As the first church bells calling for dawn prayers rang in the distance, I finished organizing everything. I stretched and went to the window. The eastern sky was beginning to blush with red. A new dawn was about to break. I was at peace. There was no regret, only certainty. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be a storm of gossip, family drama, and a heart to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt I was in complete control of my life. I picked up my phone and opened the contact for the invitation printer. Before hitting send on the first email draft, I paused. I smiled faintly. My engagement night had ended with an explosion, but from the ashes, Amelia Hayes was ready to rebuild her world on her own terms. The next morning, While much of Charleston was still waking up, I was already in work mode. I hadn't dwelled on the previous night. Instead, I'd channeled my residual emotions into energy for action. With a hot cup of tea beside me, I sat at my laptop and opened the wedding cancellation plan document I had prepared overnight. The first action was the hardest: contacting Mrs. Davis, our wedding planner. She was highly competent and had become a friend. I took a deep breath and hit the call button. "Hi, Amelia. To what do I owe this call so early? Last night's party was wonderful. All the guests were praising the concept. So excited for the final meeting next week." Mrs. Davis greeted cheerfully. My heart beat a little faster, not from doubt, but because I knew the shockwave my words were about to cause. "Hello, Mrs. Davis. Thank you so much for all your hard work, but I'm calling to cancel everything." There was a moment of silence. "Amelia, sorry. I think the connection isn't great. Did you say cancel?" "Cancel the wedding, Mrs. Davis," I said, my voice still calm and clear. "My wedding to Jackson is not going to happen. I need you to stop all proceedings and contact all the vendors we have contracts with. I will cover all the cancellation fees. Please send me a breakdown to my email." This silence was longer. I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Amelia, this isn't a joke, is it? Was there a problem? Maybe you could talk it over." "My decision is final, Mrs. Davis," I interrupted softly but firmly. "I appreciate all your help." After that call, I felt the first weight lift. I started sending the emails I had prepared overnight, one by one, to the printer, the dress designer, the caterer, the estate manager. Each click of the send button felt like a step away from the ruins of a failed future. As I was composing the email to the decor company, my parents came into my room. Their faces looked tired. It was clear they hadn't slept well either. My mother began softly. I swiveled in my chair. "Hi, Mom, Dad. I'm just handling the cancellations," I said, gesturing to my laptop screen, showing them I was already in action before they could hesitate or question. My father came closer. Seeing the list of vendors, he let out a long sigh. But a flicker of relief shone in his eyes as he saw his daughter so strong. "Let me handle the financial matters and the penalties. You just focus on yourself." "No, Dad. This is my responsibility. I started this and I need to finish it. I just need your support." That support came in the form of a bowl of hot soup from my mother and a light pat on the shoulder from my father. They didn't bombard me with questions. They trusted their daughter. Of course, the shockwave didn't stop there. Calls from relatives began to pour in, each one's voice laced with surprise and disbelief. I responded to each with the same calm phrases and tone, leaving the caller speechless. Around noon, the real storm arrived. My phone rang with the name Jackson Pierce. I declined it. Seconds later, an email notification arrived from the estate manager, also CC'd to Jackson. The subject line was confirmation cancellation of wedding event Jackson Pierce and Amelia Hayes. A text from Jackson came immediately after, all in caps. "Are you crazy? You actually did this without even talking to me?" I read the message and put my phone down. I knew Jackson would come, and I was prepared. Sure enough, that afternoon, a black sports car screeched to a halt in front of my house. Jackson got out, his face red with anger. He hadn't even bothered to park properly. He banged on the door. My father opened it. "Mr. Hayes, I need to talk to Amelia," Jackson said, skipping the pleasantries. His tone was demanding. "Come inside first, Jackson. Let's talk calmly." My father tried to pacify him. "There's nothing to talk about calmly. I need to speak with her now." I appeared from inside. "I'll handle this, Dad," I said serenely. I walked to the entryway and looked at Jackson with a blank expression. "What is it, Jackson?" Jackson's anger erupted. "What is it? You canceled our wedding over email? You humiliate me in front of hundreds of people, and now you act like nothing happened? Where is your head, Amelia Hayes?" "My head is exactly where it should be, Jackson, in a place where I can think clearly," I retorted coolly. "You were the one who humiliated both of us with that ridiculous ultimatum at our engagement party." "It wasn't an ultimatum. It was honesty," Jackson shouted, his voice attracting the attention of some passing neighbors. "I just wanted you to understand my position. I was asking for understanding, and you repay me with this humiliation? Understanding is a two-way street, Jackson. It's discussed in private, not declared unilaterally in public to test your partner." That's not honesty, it's arrogance. I crossed my arms. Each of my sentences was delivered with a sharp, logical emphasis that disarmed Jackson's every argument. Jackson looked frustrated. He ran his hands through his hair. Fine, fine. I was wrong. I chose the wrong time and place. But was this reaction necessary? Canceling everything? Do you know what this means for our families? For the Pierce Group's reputation? And there was again. His concern wasn't for my broken heart, but for his family's reputation. This wedding isn't about your family's reputation, Jackson. It's about my life, and I'm not willing to spend the rest of my life with a man whose heart is still divided. I don't want to be a woman who always has to compete with the shadow of her husband's past. I never asked you to compete. My relationship with Clara is over. Really? Then why did you feel the need to proclaim it, as if it were a primary condition of our marriage? Why can't you let her go? Jackson fell silent. He had no answer. Seeing him speechless, I knew this was the end. There's nothing more to say. You should go, Jackson. Don't make a scene here. Jackson looked at me with a mix of anger and hurt. So that's it. After everything we've shared, we haven't shared anything yet, Jackson, and I'm grateful we're stopping now before it's too late. I turned around. Goodbye, Jackson Pierce. I walked into the house and closed the door, leaving Jackson standing frozen on the porch. I didn't look back. I leaned against the door for a moment, taking a deep breath. There were no tears, only immense relief. The final battle was over, and I had won it for myself. Weeks passed, and the dust from a failed engagement began to settle. I deliberately limited my social interactions, communicating only with my family and closest friends. I needed space to breathe and time to redraw the blueprints of my life, which had suddenly been wiped clean. To fill that void, I threw myself into what I did best: work. I contacted a senior architect I knew and let him know I was looking for a new, challenging project, something that could absorb all my attention. The opportunity came sooner than expected: a proposal to restore and convert a historic building, an old townhouse in the heart of Charleston's historic French Quarter. The building, a long vacant antebellum-style home, had been acquired by an art collector who wanted to transform it into a modern art gallery. For me, this project was more than just a job. It was the perfect escape. The French Quarter, with its narrow cobblestone streets and echoes of history in every wall, was the ideal place to heal. The restoration project itself was a fitting metaphor for my life, taking something old, broken, and forgotten, and giving it new life and purpose without erasing its original soul. The first day I visited the site, I fell in love instantly. The building was in a sorry state. Paint peeled, part of the roof had caved in, and the courtyard was overgrown with weeds. But the structure was still solid. The old wooden columns stood with dignity, and the delicate ironwork of the balconies told stories of the past. I walked alone through the dusty rooms, running my hand over the cool plaster walls. I could envision how the light would stream through the large windows once cleaned, how the old heart pine floors would gleam again, and how modern art would create a beautiful contrast with the classic architecture. The project was complex, demanding precision. I had to collaborate with the Historical Preservation Society, find local artisans who understood old techniques, and simultaneously design a modern, functional interior. It was exactly what I needed: a complex problem to solve, a beauty to create. Amidst the debris of the old building, I began to rebuild my own foundation, brick by brick. The building's owner was a man named Ethan Cole. I had only communicated with him via email and phone. Through our conversations, I'd formed the impression that he was very meticulous, with a strong vision and a deep respect for his property's historical value. That day, we were to meet in person at the project site for the first time. I arrived early, busy walking through every corner, making quick sketches. Every time I come here, I discover a new detail I missed before. A calm voice suddenly said from behind me. I turned. A man was standing in the doorway, the afternoon light creating a silhouette around him. He wasn't flashy like Jackson. His attire was simple, a linen shirt and cotton pants. His face wasn't conventionally handsome, but it radiated calm, and his gaze was sharp and observant like an artist's. Like his name, Cole, He brought a serene atmosphere. "Mr. Ethan Cole?" I asked, extending my hand. The man smiled and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Please call me Ethan, and you must be Amelia Hayes, the architect. The sketches you sent me were more impressive than any resume." I was a little surprised by the unexpected compliment. "Thank you. I was also impressed by your vision for this place." We spent the next 2 hours walking through the building together. Our conversation flowed naturally. It wasn't just a client and an architect. It was two people who shared a passion for art and beauty. We even had a small debate. Ethan wanted to preserve a carved wooden mantelpiece, somewhat deteriorated due to its sentimental value. I, from my architectural perspective, argued that the wood was weakened and would pose a structural risk. "I understand the historical value," I said, gently tapping the wood, "but termites have eaten through its core. If we force it to stay, it will fail. How about we create a replica with the same details using reclaimed wood and frame the original salvageable pieces as a work of art on the wall?" Ethan was silent for a moment, looking at the mantelpiece and then at me. A glint of admiration appeared in his eyes. "That's a brilliant solution. You don't just think about function, you respect the soul. I like the way you work." As the sun fully set, leaving a purple glow in the Charleston sky, we sat on the dusty steps of the courtyard. Ethan could sense a layer of vulnerability hidden behind my professionalism. He didn't know the whole story, but he saw it in the way I kept myself busy, as if work were the only life raft keeping me afloat. He didn't ask, didn't pry into my personal life. He simply said, "I'm glad this place is in the right hands. I have a good feeling about this. It's going to be a masterpiece." Those words, purely about my work and my skill, felt like a comforting balm to my still weary soul. That meeting gave me a glimmer of hope. This wasn't just a project. It was a collaboration. And for the first time in weeks, I felt I wasn't alone. Though I tried to bury myself in work, the outside world didn't forget me so easily. The echoes of the failed engagement still surfaced. One day while buying coffee, I ran into a distant acquaintance of Jackson's. "Amelia, how are you?" The woman greeted with an overly enthusiastic tone. "Honey, I heard about you two. Such a shame, really. You seem so perfect together." Jackson seems to be under a tremendous amount of stress lately. I just managed a slight smile. "I guess everyone has their own path, if you'll excuse me." I left quickly. On social media, I saw photos of mutual friends with Jackson, laughing at events I was supposed to have attended with him. I felt a small pang of exclusion, a reminder that breaking up with Jackson also meant breaking up with a part of my world. But amidst the unpleasant echoes of gossip, the real support felt even stronger. My closest friends never wavered. They didn't pester me with questions, but brought me food, watched movies with me, or just sat beside me in silence when I was exhausted. If you want to be angry, scream. If you want to cry, cry. We're here. Well, my friends told me. My family was my most powerful fortress. My father would often stop by the project site, bringing me lunch with the excuse of wanting to see the building's progress. My mother quietly made sure my room was always tidy, creating a space where I could focus. These genuine, selfless supports became my new foundation. I realized I had been so focused on building a future with one person that I had almost forgotten I already possessed a solid structure full of people who loved me unconditionally. That afternoon, I stood alone on the second floor of the gallery project, watching the sunset paint the Charleston sky. A month had passed since the night that changed my life. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The rubble around me no longer seemed like the end of everything. Rather, it seemed like the beginning of something much more honest and strong, something built with my own two hands. The restoration project in the French Quarter was progressing faster than expected. Under my meticulous supervision, the old townhouse was slowly beginning to regain its charm. The team of local artisans worked with enthusiasm, and noticeable progress was made every day. The site became my haven, a world where I had complete control and where logic and creativity merged in harmony. But one hot afternoon, that harmony was broken. A familiar black sports car pulled up in front of the project site, kicking up dust from the road. Jackson Pierce got out. He looked very different from the arrogant man I had last seen. His hair was slightly disheveled. His face was gaunt, and his expensive suit seemed wrinkled. He was carrying a large bouquet of white lilies, my favorite flower. I, discussing something with the foreman, instantly felt a knot in my stomach. I signaled for the workers to continue and walked toward Jackson with a determined stride. "Jackson, what are you doing here?" "This is my workplace," I said, my voice low and sharp. "I know. I just wanted to talk," Jackson replied, offering me the flowers. "They're for you." I didn't accept them. I just looked at Jackson, waiting. "Amelia, I'm a wreck without you," Jackson continued, his tone no longer angry, but almost desperate. "Everything is a mess. My work, my life. I can't focus. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I should never have said that." It was the first time I had heard Jackson admit a mistake, but for some reason, it didn't feel sincere. It sounded like the wail of a child whose toy had been broken. "I'll change, Amelia. I promise. I'll fix it with Clara. I'll draw a clear line. Please, just give me one more chance," he begged. Just as I was about to respond, Ethan Cole came out from inside the building with 2 bottles of water. He stopped when he saw the scene. He didn't approach, but stood in the doorway, giving me space. Yet, his presence felt like silent support. Jackson's eyes immediately caught Ethan's presence. The pitiful expression on his face instantly transformed into jealous sarcasm. "Ah, so that's what this is. You didn't waste any time finding a replacement." My patience ran out. "Stop it, Jackson," I hissed. "Don't drag others into the problems you created. My decision has nothing to do with anyone but you and your actions. Now, please leave." "But, Amelia, leave," I repeated, my voice louder this time, causing some workers to turn around. "And don't ever show up at my workplace or look for me again." Jackson's face hardened. He roughly threw the bouquet of lilies on the ground, and without another word, he turned, got in his car, and sped away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a pile of crushed white petals. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm my racing breath. Ethan slowly approached and offered me one of the water bottles. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, accepting the water. "I'm okay," I replied, and I realized I truly was. The interruption from the past no longer had the power to ruin my day. The incident at the work site left an uncomfortable residue in my mind. I realized that as long as the name Clara Reed remained a mystery, that shadow would always be present. I needed closure. As if fate had heard my thoughts, the next day I received a message from an unknown number. "Hi, Amelia Hayes. This is Clara Reed. I heard Jackson came to your workplace yesterday. I think there are some things we should discuss for both our sakes. Would you be willing to meet?" I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won over my reluctance. This was my chance to get answers directly from the source. I agreed. We met at a quiet tea shop tucked away on a side street downtown. Clara Reed was already sitting at a corner table. She was a very elegant woman with a strong professional aura. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes showed a hint of weariness. There was no trace of hostility in her gaze. "Thank you for coming," Clara said after we had ordered. "I want an explanation, too," I replied frankly. Clara smiled faintly. "I won't waste your time. Jackson and I have a long history." "That's true, but our romantic relationship ended over a year ago, long before he met you. The problem is Jackson never quite learned how to be emotionally independent." She paused. "He still relies on me for validation, for business advice, and for an ego boost when he's down. I've tried to distance myself many times, but he always finds a way to pull me back in, whether with the excuse of business or friendship. Honestly, I'm exhausted." I listened, absorbing every word in silence. "The declaration he made at your engagement party," Clara continued, her eyes meeting mine with regret. "He did that without my consent. I was as shocked as everyone else when a friend told me. It was Jackson's way of taking control, of proving he could have it all, you as his future and me as his safety net. It was deeply unfair to you and to me." Then Clara showed me the screen of her phone. It was a picture of her with a man, both smiling happily. "I'm engaged to someone else, Amelia. I'm trying to move on with my life, too. But Jackson keeps making things complicated." This was a turning point for me. I had imagined a complicated love triangle. The reality was much simpler and sadder. It was the story of an immature man holding two women hostage in the drama of his own ego. I understand, I said finally, and there was relief in my voice. Thank you for being so honest with me, Clara. Thank you, Clara replied. At least now you know this was never about you not being enough. It was all about him not being mature enough. I left the tea shop feeling lighter than I ever had before. The last fog had lifted. I was truly free. The following days felt brighter. Freed from the weight of doubt, I dedicated myself to my work with renewed vigor, and progress on the art gallery accelerated. My relationship with Ethan also deepened. We were a solid team, able to understand each other with just a glance. One afternoon, as Ethan and I were supervising the installation of the glass roof structure in the courtyard, the clear Charleston sky suddenly darkened. A strong wind began to blow, and a few raindrops quickly turned into an intense summer storm. The workers rushed to cover equipment and seek shelter. Ethan and I were trapped in the main, already roof space of the gallery, watching the rain dance on the courtyard's still fresh concrete floor. The sound of the torrential downpour created an intimate, peaceful atmosphere. Rain always has a way of forcing us to pause, Ethan said, breaking the silence. He turned to look at me. You seem different these last few days. Lighter. I smiled. I've let go of a weight, I responded. I didn't feel the need to go into details, but I wanted to share the feeling. I just got the closure I needed. A long chapter of my life has completely closed. Ethan nodded with understanding. He didn't press. Instead, he looked at the rain. When my old gallery failed, I thought it was the end of the world. I blamed everyone, the circumstances. It took me a long time to realize that failure gave me the chance to stop, see what went wrong, and rebuild in a better way, like this building. I looked at Ethan. He rarely talked about himself. Hearing a bit of his past made me feel more connected. We were both, in our own ways, people who were rebuilding. Sometimes demolishing something is just as important as building it, I replied softly. Exactly, Ethan said, because it gives you the chance to build a stronger foundation. We fell back into silence, but this time it was filled with meaning. It was just the two of us and the soothing sound of the rain. In the middle of a still, unfinished building, I felt I had found the most solid shelter, a place where I was understood without needing many words. Just as Clara had predicted, without her, as his unofficial advisor and emotional buffer, Jackson's business empire began to show cracks. Ruled by emotion and a bruised ego, he made a series of poor business decisions. He became aggressive in negotiations, offended longtime clients, and ignored the advice of his own team. The news reached me through an old friend who worked in the same industry. A major real estate project Jackson was developing in New York was on the brink of total collapse after a primary investor pulled out. The reason? Chaotic project management and the arrogant attitude of its leader. I felt no satisfaction, only a vague sadness at seeing someone self-destruct. That night, while working late in my studio, I received a call from Jackson. This time, I decided to answer, feeling that perhaps this would be the last. The voice on the other end of the phone was panicked and desperate. There was no arrogance left, only despair. Amelia, it's all gone, he said, his voice trembling. The project failed. The investors are gone. It's all my fault. There was a pause. I waited. It's Clara's fault, too, Jackson continued, his tone shifting toward accusation. She wouldn't help me at all. She left me alone. And then the blame turned to me. And it's your fault, too. If you hadn't left, I wouldn't be like this. I need you, Amelia. Why did you leave me when I needed you most? I listened calmly to the entire chain of accusations. Before, those words would have hurt me, but now I heard them as the voice of a stranger drowning in his own problems. Jackson, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Blaming everyone else isn't going to solve your problems. You made your own decisions in business and in our relationship, but I hope you find a way to fix everything. I interrupted him, but that's not my job anymore. I have my own life now. Goodbye. I hung up before Jackson could reply. This time I had truly, completely severed the last tie. I no longer felt anger or pity or even cared. I just felt neutrality. And neutrality was the most absolute form of freedom. 2 months after my last conversation with Jackson, the art gallery project reached its first major milestone. The entire main structural restoration was complete. The new roof was installed. The old walls had been reinforced and repainted in their original colors, and the old heart pine floors had been polished to a shine. To celebrate, Ethan suggested a small toast just for the core team and the artisans who had worked so hard. That afternoon, in the still empty central hall of the gallery, we gathered to give thanks and share some food. The atmosphere was warm and filled with gratitude. For me, the moment felt very emotional. I looked around at the high ceilings, the sturdy columns, and the golden sunlight streaming through the large windows. I had done it. I had transformed ruins into something beautiful and hopeful. It was a tangible testament to my ability and my perseverance. After the workers left, only Ethan and I remained. We stood side by side in the center of the room, contemplating our work in a comfortable silence. There was a time I wasn't sure this place could be saved, Ethan said, his eyes scanning the room. But you saw its potential and brought it back to life. We brought it back to life, I corrected with a smile. It was a team effort. Ethan turned to face me with a deep, soft gaze. Amelia, he said, his voice more serious. Working with you these past few months has changed more than just this building. My heart skipped a beat. From the first day I met you, I admired your strength. I admire your talent, your way of seeing beauty where others only see ruins. But over time, I realized I wasn't just admiring Amelia Hayes, the architect. He paused, searching for the right words. I've grown to love you. The confession was quiet, sincere, and without any pressure. It wasn't a grand declaration, but an honest expression of feeling. I looked at Ethan's face, bathed in the sunset light. I saw warmth, respect, and sincerity in it. All the things I had once longed for. I didn't need to answer with words. The most genuine, brilliant smile I'd had in years spread across my face. In the middle of the gallery that had become the symbol of my own rebirth, I knew I had not only rebuilt a building, but I had found a new foundation for my heart, and this time it felt incredibly solid. Ethan's sincere confession that afternoon in the gallery opened a new door in our relationship. We didn't rush. Instead, we let the feeling grow organically, the same way we had cared for the old townhouse in the French Quarter. We were no longer just architect and client, but two souls creating something beautiful together. Our days were filled with happy activity. From morning until evening, we spent time at the project site debating which paint colors best suited the natural light, or discussing the optimal placement of lighting for each piece of art to shine. I focused on the technical and functional aspects, while Ethan brought the artistic and philosophical touch. We complemented each other perfectly. We often stayed after all the workers had left, sitting on a blanket on the still dusty floor, sharing a simple dinner and talking about things beyond work. I told him about my dream of designing schools in rural areas. Ethan told me about his travels across the country to meet local artists. In these relaxed conversations, I found a peace I had never felt with Jackson. With Ethan, I didn't need to be the best version of myself. I could be my complete self. The sometimes too perfectionistic architect, the woman still learning to heal her wounds, the dreamer with sometimes strange ideas. And Ethan accepted it all, even adored every detail. I love how you furrow your brow when you're deep in thought, Ethan told me one night, brushing a strand of hair from my face. It looks like you're drawing the blueprints of the universe in your head. I laughed, my cheeks flushing slightly. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen as a human being with all my complexities, not as an accessory or an asset. The process of building the gallery became a metaphor for our relationship. Slow, thoughtful, respectful of the past, but with a clear vision for a bright future. When the gallery's interior work was nearing completion, Ethan surprised me. "Do you want to come home with me this weekend?" He asked casually, not to my apartment, but to where I grew up. My mom has been wanting to meet the brilliant architect who transformed this old building. My heart fluttered. It felt like a big step. I remembered how formal and tense my first meeting with Jackson's family had been, so focused on image. But seeing Ethan's warm gaze, I knew this time would be different. Ethan's mother's house was in a small town in the countryside known for its artisans. The house was modest, a wooden home surrounded by a lush, well-tended garden. On the porch, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile was painting pottery. This was Mrs. Cole, Ethan's mother. The meeting was not at all awkward. Mrs. Cole greeted me with a warm hug, as if I were an old friend. She didn't ask about my family background or my education. Instead, she asked enthusiastically about the gallery's restoration process and the philosophy behind my choice of materials. "Amelia, you've saved the soul of that building," Mrs. Cole said as she served hot tea. "Thank you. That building was my late husband's legacy. Seeing it come back to life is the greatest happiness for us." I spent the day chatting comfortably on the porch, learning a little about pottery painting and listening to stories of Ethan's childhood. I could see where Ethan got his serenity and love for art. In that simple, warm home, I felt unconditionally accepted. I wasn't a future daughter-in-law being evaluated. I was a cherished guest, appreciated for being who I was. As we were leaving at sunset, Mrs. Cole took my hands. "Take care of my son, please. Since he met you, his light has started to shine brighter again." On the way back, I was silent, my heart full. I looked at Ethan, who was concentrating on driving. The man beside me wasn't just a partner. He was a home, a solid foundation built on sincerity and the warmth of a family. A few weeks before the gallery's grand opening, I received a message from Jackson. It was short and in a completely different tone than before. "Amelia, could you give me a moment of your time for the last time? There's something I need to tell you in person. I promise I won't bother you." With my heart now calm, I agreed. We met at the same tea shop where I had met Clara. The Jackson who met me was a completely different person. There was no trace of arrogance left. He was thinner, quieter, and there was a maturity in his eyes that didn't exist before. He ordered a black coffee, not an expensive drink. "Thanks for coming," he began. "I won't take long. I just wanted to do something I should have done a long time ago." He looked me directly in the eyes. "I'm sorry." His voice was firm and sincere. "I apologize for everything I did, for my words at that party, for my ego, for my immaturity. I ruined something good because of my foolishness, and it's taken me months to realize it." He briefly shared that he had lost his business, but that it had become his turning point. He was trying to rebuild it from scratch in a more honest way. He also said he had cut all contact with Clara and wished her all the happiness. "I hear you're happy now," Jackson continued with a faint smile. "I'm glad. Truly, you deserve the best." I felt the sincerity in his every word. The last weight, when I wasn't even aware I was carrying, finally lifted. There was no more anger or disappointment, only peace. "Thank you for your apology, Jackson." "And I accept it," I replied. "I hope you rebuild a better life for yourself, too." We shook hands, a handshake that closed a chapter peacefully and maturely. When I left that tea shop, I knew the story of Jackson Pierce had truly become the epilogue in the book of my life. The gallery project was 100% complete. The building now stood majestically, a perfect blend of old-world charm and new-world spirit. To celebrate before the official grand opening, Ethan took me to one more place. "There's one more spot I want to show you, a place where I always find inspiration to start something new." He took me to White Point Garden. When we arrived, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, bathing the magnificent park and its historic monuments in a golden light. The atmosphere was magical and sacred. We walked among the old oak trees, talking about history, legacy, and the things that endure through time. As the sun nearly touched the horizon, painting the sky with a palette of purples, oranges, and reds, Ethan led me to a spot with a perfect view of the harbor. He stopped and turned to me. He didn't kneel. He simply took both of my hands in his own warm ones. "Amelia Hayes," he began, his voice soft but full of emotion. "Our story began at sunset in an old, nearly ruined townhouse. Then you came and transformed it into a place full of light and hope. You've done the same for my life." My eyes began to fill with tears. "I want to spend every sunset and every sunrise of my life with you. I want to build something with you that endures, not a stone, but of love and respect." He continued, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple but exquisitely beautiful ring with a delicate detail engraved on it. inspired by the ironwork of the gallery we had restored. He had clearly designed it himself. "Will you marry me?" In the majesty of a historic park that had witnessed thousands of sunsets, with my heart full of happiness, I answered with a trembling voice. "Yes, I will, Ethan." The night of the gallery's grand opening was a spectacular celebration, not of empty luxury, but of soul-deep richness. The space was filled with artists, collectors, friends, and family. Soft jazz music mixed with laughter and warm conversations. Every piece of art on display seemed to sing in unison, celebrating its new home. The gallery's name was Renaissance, symbolizing its new beginning. I stood in the middle of the crowd beside my fiancé, Ethan, dressed in an elegant ivory-colored gown. My face radiated a happiness I couldn't hide. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the dreamlike scene. My parents stood in a corner, watching me with pride. Across the room, I saw Clara Reed, who had attended with her fiancé. We exchanged a brief smile of understanding. That night, I gave a short speech. I spoke of the philosophy behind the restoration, of the importance of respecting the past to build a stronger future. When I thanked the team, my eyes met Ethan's. Everyone in the room could see the love and admiration that flowed between us. Later, as the event was in full swing, Ethan and I slipped away to the courtyard, which was now a small garden under the glass roof. From there, we could see the full moon shining brightly. I took a deep breath of the cool Charleston night air. I remembered my engagement party a year ago, the humiliation, the confusion, and the cold decision I had made at the end of that night. Okay, that one word I had spoken then wasn't a word of surrender. It was a word of beginning, the one that opened the door to my real life. I had weathered the storm, demolished the faulty foundation, and with patience had rebuilt everything from scratch. Ethan put his arm around me. "Look what we've built together," he whispered. I smiled and leaned my head on Ethan's shoulder. My name, Amelia, meant work and striving. After a long and dark eclipse, I was finally shining again, not with a borrowed light, but with my own complete and radiant light. And beside me was Ethan, my coal, my constant, who wasn't trying to dim my light, but would always be there to join me in every sunrise and every sunset. What would you have done if you were in my shoes at that engagement party? Let me know in the comments below.